How about this for a quick little fact? Did you know that the United States Marine Corps did not allow black people to serve in its ranks until 1942?
The Marine Corps had refused to accept any blacks at all. But after 1942, as casualties in the Pacific mounted and pressure from civil rights groups intensified, John Gray and others were finally allowed to sign on and serve in segregated units.
Yes, that's right. 1942. The Marine Corps was started in 1775. That's 167 years that not a single black person was serving in the world's best fighting force. Imagine that.
Color, Negro. Complexion, Negro. Race, Negro. Everything was Negro except height and weight.
Despite the bravery of African Americans in all of America's previous wars, despite the argument made by the NAACP and others that a Jim Crow army cannot fight for a free world, the armed forces of the United States remained strictly segregated. Black draftees from the North, sent to training camps in the Deep South, encountered Jim Crow laws for the first time. Some who defied those laws paid with their lives. At home and overseas, there were frequent and sometimes bloody confrontations between black servicemen and white civilians, black troops and white ones, over women and local customs and equal access to military facilities. Growing protest by African Americans would force the military to make a few changes. An Army Air Corps training camp was set up at Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. A single ship, the USS Mason, was manned entirely by blacks, except for her commander. The 761st Tank Battalion would eventually fight in Europe, sent to the front by George Patton with the admonition, I don't care what color you are, so long as you go up there and kill those Kraut sons of bitches.
It's Black History Month, and it's time to celebrate the history of black people, which actually doesn't mean it's all black people who played a part. Another big shout out gotta go to the one, the only, Lyndon B. Johnson.
Congress passes the most sweeping civil rights bill ever to be written into the law, and thus reaffirms the conception of equality for all men that began with Lincoln and the Civil War 100 years ago. The Negro won his freedom then. He wins his dignity now. 5 hours after the House passes the measure, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is signed at the White House by President Johnson. Before an audience of legislators and civil rights leaders who had labored long and hard for passage of the bill, President Johnson calls for all Americans to back what he calls a turning point in history.
When JFK got assassinated, Lyndon B. Johnson was the new president of the United States. He's known for the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and Vietnam. He's criticized for being kind of a softie and not doing so much for Vietnam, but you say what he wants about the guy, the Civil Rights Act changed lives all around. I know it definitely impacted me as a black person. I don't know where I would be right now, and I don't know where a lot of black people would be without Lyndon B. Johnson signing that act. Lyndon B. Johnson is a great example of how one man can touch a lot of people's lives.
This Civil Rights Act is a challenge to all of us to go to work in our communities and our states, in our homes and in our hearts, to eliminate the last vestiges of injustice in our beloved country. So, tonight I urge every public official, every religious leader, every business and professional man, every working man, every housewife, I urge every American to join in this effort to bring justice and hope to all our people and to bring peace to our land.
Next up on my little heroes list, we're going to talk about the one, the only, the dude himself, James Baldwin. What I like about James Baldwin so much is his intellect and his way of articulating the things that he went through.
When I was growing up, I was taught in American history books that Africa had no history, and neither did I. That I was a savage, about whom the less said the better, who had been saved by Europe and brought to America. And of course, I believed it. I didn't have much choice. Those were the only books there were. Everyone else seemed to agree. If you walk out of Harlem, ride out of Harlem, downtown, the world agrees. What you see is much bigger, cleaner, whiter, richer, safer than where you are. They collect the garbage. People obviously can pay their life insurance. The children look happy, safe. You're not. And you go back home. And it would seem then, of course, that it's an act of God, that this is true, that you belong where white people have put you. It is only since the Second World War that there's been a counter-image in the world, and that image not come about through any legislation on the part of any American government, but through the fact that Africa was suddenly on the stage of the world, and Africans had to be dealt with in a way they'd never been dealt with before. This gave an American Negro, for the first time, a sense of himself beyond a savage or a clown. It has created, and will create, a great many conundrums. One of the great things that the white world does not know, but I think I do know, is that black people are just like everybody else. One has used the myth of Negro and the myth of color to pretend and to assume that you are dealing essentially with something exotic, bizarre, and practically, according to human laws, unknown. Alas, it is not true. We are also mercenaries, dictators, murderers, liars. We are human too.
I like James Baldwin because he wasn't afraid. He said what he meant, and he wouldn't back down for anybody. James Baldwin is probably one of my heroes. You go, James Baldwin. I wish I could just be half as smart as you.
Many years ago, when I first came to London, I was in the British Museum, naturally, and one of the West Indians who worked there struck up a conversation with me and wanted to know where I was from. And I told him I was from Harlem. And that answer didn't satisfy him. And I didn't understand what he meant. I was born in Harlem. I was born in Harlem Hospital, I said. I was born in New York. None of these answers satisfied him. He said, where was your mother born? And I said, she was born in Maryland. And I could see, though I didn't understand it, that he was growing more and more disgusted with me. His tone became more and more impatient. And where was your father born? My father was born in New Orleans. Yes, he said, but man, where were you born? And then I began to get it. You know, I said, my mother was born in Maryland, my father was born in New Orleans, I was born in New York. He said, but before that, where were you born? And I had to say, I don't know. And I could see that he did not believe me. And I tried to explain, you know, there's no way for me. He said, don't you care enough to find out? And I tried to explain that if I were originally from Dakar or from wherever I was in Africa, I couldn't find out where it was because my entry into America is a bill of sale. And that stops, you know, that stops you from going any further. At some point in our history, I became Baldwin's nigger. That's how I got my name.
As African Americans are people who were brought here from a different country, no records or real definitions of their past. A lot of history and a lot of heritage has been lost in that process.
On the mall, just paint a picture, I've been on a mission. Coming from the district, everything but monumental. I ain't gotta mention all the low floors where the sir since a boy find it hard to follow politicians. And the Murray and Barry, I had Barry Sanders. Never wanna be gangster, put them dirty pads up. The man route, try and get my parents out. Fuck the stash by it, I was mastering a slam route. Fly route, I write double wide out. Since the rhyme route, the whole city taking my route. Taking my route. Tell these niggas that it's my house. Black hero. Ain't no black hero. Ain't no hope for a young nigga. Ain't no goals for a young nigga. Too short for a sport nigga. It gets horrific. We glorify the drug dealer. No nigga. Ain't no goal for a young nigga. Too short for a sport nigga. It be horrific. We glorify the drug dealer. Ain't no goals for a young nigga. Too short for a sport nigga. Still we all gifted.